dental practices across the country are not accepting new adult patients. Now, with Rishi Sunak on holiday, acting Prime Minister Oliver Dowden joins us now for the morning round. Good morning to you. As I was saying earlier, of course, we've got interest rate rises potentially today to talk about. I know you're on to talk about a list of possible threats to the country, a new list that you've come up with. But we must talk to you about the NHS dental crisis, because that is what our viewers are really talking to us about this morning. I don't know if you've seen the pictures from Faversham in Kent, and you may have just heard it there. 27,000 people rang up for 60 NHS dental spots that had come up. 100 people queued up outside. They had hundreds of emails. It is just a sign, isn't it, of a complete breakdown of NHS dentistry in the country. And we've had somebody who is the chair of the British Dental Association on this morning who has said 15 years ago there was a report that said this was on the horizon. Now there's been another report and it says basically the same. The Conservative government have done nothing to help ease this problem, and people are now resorting to taking their own teeth out.
Well, first of all, I understand your viewers' frustration with access to dentistry. I would just say at the beginning, I don't quite agree with your characterisation. It is actually the case that there are more dentists now than there were when we came to office, and we're investing £3 billion a year. But you're right, there is more that we need to do. And the key thing is to get more dentists into the NHS. And so we announced a few weeks ago, for the first time in the history of the NHS, a long-term workforce plan for the NHS, putting that long-term investment in, which will mean that we recruit 40% more dentists. It's by getting more dentists in that we'll be able to deal with this.
But nobody wants to do it, do they? Because they say it's not worth it. It's £25.80, I think, on the NHS for a basic initial examination that may include an X-ray. And if you go private, they can earn £59 for that same job. And Eddie Crouch this morning was saying that they haven't had an increase in the budget for NHS dentistry in a decade. So what you're doing is a drop in the ocean and it's not going to work.
Well, I wouldn't characterise it in that way. Increasing by 40% the number of dentists that we train is going to increase the supply, the number of dentists in the system. In the end, that's the way you get more dentists. So people like your viewers aren't going to have to queue for dentists, because there'll be more dentists there in the first place that they can access. Now, in terms of how much dentists are paid, the so-called NHS dentist contract, of course, we keep that under review. But we have put more money than ever into dentistry with the £3 billion that we're currently putting in this year. But I don't want to dispute for a second the challenges people are facing, and I understand their frustration, but that's precisely why we're taking this action.
But you are disputing that. I mean, look, what Eddie Crouch said to us here, we've got a quote, a soundbite from the interview we did with him earlier.
Of an hour ago.
Yes, regarding the Health Select Committee report. Let's see what he said.
We've had probably 15, 16 years of inactivity. We haven't increased the budget for NHS dentistry in a decade. And dental charges have actually risen 8% this year by the government. They've risen 8%. And that, not a single penny of that has actually gone into reinvesting in dentistry.
So dental charges have gone up 8%. And he's saying, he's on the front line, he's the chair of the British Dental Association, not a single penny has actually gone into reinvesting into dentistry.
Well, it is the case that we're putting record sums in with the £3 billion that I've said that we are investing into NHS dentistry. And if you look at the numbers, we've increased the number of NHS dentists by more than 1,000 since we came to office. But I do accept that there is more that we need to do, which is why we need to tackle the root causes of this. And the root cause of this is making sure that we get more dentists into the service in the first place. And that's why we've done something that no government has done, actually, interestingly, since the NHS was founded over 75 years ago, which is to actually say, look, how many people do we need in the health service? How many doctors do we need? How many nurses do we need? How many dentists do we need? And let's provide the training places for them. It's that kind of long-term thinking that will make sure that we deal with this challenge.
Well, you have been in power for a very long time. The committee in April, the Health and Social Care Committee, condemned NHS dentistry as unfit for the 21st century. That's what you've achieved. Unfit for the 21st century. It's not a record to be proud of.
Well, I'm proud of the fact that we have actually increased the number of dentists in the NHS by over 1,000 since we came to power. I'm proud of the fact that we're putting £3 billion into the NHS dentistry. We're putting more into our NHS than in its entire history. In fact, since we came to power, we've increased NHS spending by next year by 90% since 2010. But of course, there is more that we need to do in respect of NHS dentistry, and we've identified the problems with NHS dentistry, and that's why we are getting more people trained into the service.
Those problems were identified 15 years ago, Oliver Dowden. Those problems were identified 15 years ago. Anyway. Should we talk about interest rates, Ben?
Well, look, I mean, carry on,
so just finally on that, forgive me, since then we have actually increased the number of NHS dentists. I don't think it's an entirely fair characterisation, but at the same time, I do respect and I hear the points that are being made about people lacking access, but I think I've explained what we're doing.
I mean, undoubtedly, I'm sure you speak to your constituents, but our viewers, who are our constituents, if you like, are unequivocally of the agreement that they cannot get a dentist appointment on the NHS. One of the things that the incurred cost of that, if they have to go privately, means they have to spend more money, and we're expecting the Bank of England to raise interest rates later on today. Is that something that you're welcoming?
Well, the Bank of England is independent. It has to take its decision without interference from ministers, and it wouldn't be helpful for me to comment on decisions that they are making. But what I do know, and all your viewers will know, is the challenge of rising prices. And at the root of that is inflation caused by both Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the post-COVID recovery of the economy. We've got to bear down on inflation. That's the only way we can get prices under control. So government is doing its bit. We're making sure we live within our means. We don't spend too much money in a way that could drive up inflation. And the Bank of England needs to do its bit to make sure we have interest rates that control inflation. The sooner we can do that, the sooner we can deliver on our pledge to halve interest rates, the sooner we can stop those rates happening and they can start to fall. And there are encouraging signs that inflation is starting to fall.
And I know before you go you wanted to talk about the National Risk Register, which is a list of issues that threaten the UK. I know that we had Jackie Smith on earlier, a former Home Secretary. The list was out when she was in charge, and a future pandemic was at the top of that list. It's on your list too.
That was in 2008.
Yeah, that was in... But my question, I suppose, would be, what is the point of a National Risk Register when, during the COVID inquiry, we've already heard that worries and concerns about planning for a pandemic were not listened to?
Well, the first duty of government is to keep people safe. And my whole experience, actually, of the pandemic as a minister was the more you were open with people, the more you were transparent about the risks we were facing, the better prepared we could be, because people could scrutinise those ideas, and businesses or voluntary organisations like the Red Cross could make plans accordingly. So the risk register sets out the risks we're facing. Government is then taking action. Actually, if you look behind me, you can see the largest wind farm in the world being built just outside Hartlepool to go on Dogger Bank. That will provide energy for 6 million homes, helping us with energy security, meaning, for example, we're less reliant on Russian oil and gas and other dangerous sources or unstable sources of oil and gas. That will mean we're more resilient as the next crises face us.
OK. We're going to have to leave it there, Mr Dowden, but thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much. Kerry on Twitter, going back to our top story, we're having to pay privately £230 to have braces taken off my son's teeth, which have been on his teeth for nearly a year. No appointments available. So wrong that our children are being neglected like this. Imagine you've got to find £230 for something that should be free on the NHS.